Okay, so now I'm clamping the pad on top of the frame there so it won't move around. And then I'm going to use a transfer punch, which I just had. I'm going to use a transfer punch and transfer that mark right into the chassis so we can drill some holes. There it is. Transfer punch. It's just a solid piece of rod, but it has a little sharp prick punch thing on the end. So we've got the one that fits that size hole. And that way, once we get our bracket positioned, we can just thump it with a hammer and it'll make an accurate indentation in the chassis. And then we'll do the same thing up here on this one. Yeah, it's lining up. Okay. Now I want to make sure the top edge is parallel, and if so, this edge should be parallel and that should be parallel. We're looking good. So now we're going to transfer the holes. Don't need to hit it real hard. A little harder. There we go. Now that one's done, we can remove that one temporarily, and we're ready to drill holes in that one. Want to make sure you get it positioned right. Okay, now we're ready to drill those holes. I've got to do one more on the chassis. Alright, now on the frame rail, I think I'm just going to drill and tap the frame. That part of the frame rail is only 1/8 inch thick, which isn't really thick, but it'll be thick enough for what we need with these. I mean, this is only like 18 gauge up here, so that's going to work out just fine. We'll do rib nuts in this one. We can't tap this one, but we'll do rib nuts here and drill and tap that. Alright, so the first step to drilling these holes is we need an 1/8 inch pilot bit. This is just going to make sure that we can accurately find the center of our prick punch and maintain that centeredness of the bit. Sometimes if you start with too big of a bit right off the bat, it wobbles on you and then you lose where that center of that hole was. And this is very important that we keep the center exactly where it needs to be. So always make sure that it falls right inside that dimple, like that. And now when we drill the next size, it'll center itself a lot easier. This is why you don't send your chassis straight to powder coat right when you get it in the mailbox. You always want to do test fit things like this. You might have to do some fabrication here and there. Now granted, this chassis for the average guy didn't need much, but we're not your average guy. We're not your average hot rod shop. We like to do some crazy stuff. And when you start modifying the inner fenders and roll cages and all that kind of stuff, hit the pause button on your powder coat. Get all your mods done, double check it, and then send it to powder coat. You can thank me later. Now we're gonna step it up with a step bit. We're gonna drill these to 5/16 because in the end we wanna tap them to 3/8 16. So 5/16 is the correct size that we need. There's actually little numbers on the side of that bit. Okay, we're getting close. I'm gonna check it. I think that's it right there. Eighth inch, 5/32, 3/16, 7/32, 1/4 inch, 9/32, 5/16. No, we got one more. You don't want to go too far if you're tapping it. Okay, so we got one more. Right there. I think that's it. Right there. Yep. That's it. Okay, now we're gonna power tap those guys. So I've got a 1/2 inch cordless drill here. It's pretty powerful. We got a 3 flute, 3/8 16 tap. Now you always want to make sure you got a pretty sharp tap, and we're gonna use some cutting fluid on here. Okay, so always make sure you got the correct size hole, and you gotta brace yourself. You gotta hold this thing. You don't want that doing that number. It'll break your tap off in the frame, so you gotta support that with your arm right here. Super important. You gotta guide it in there without getting all janky on it. You gotta make sure it goes in real smooth and out smooth. Otherwise you break your tap. The taps are expensive and they're not fun to get out of the metal. Tap magic, this is a cutting fluid. This is not a lubricating fluid. Alright, here we go. Brace yourself. It's gonna take a few hits. Chuck's not tight enough. Get some vice grips on that guy. There we go. And then clean the chips out. Put a little bit more oil on there. Cutting oil, not lubricating oil. There is a difference. I think those were too small. That's why it took a minute there to get going. That's alright, it worked anyways. Okay, those are ready to bolt on. Okay, now we need to install some rib nuts up here. So the next thing we need to do is bump those pilot holes up to the next size drill bit. So we can use our step bit on that again. These rib nuts need to be 3/8 16 rib nuts. So the size of hole that we need is 17/32. No bigger, no smaller. Has to be right on the money. 17/32 is 1/32 more than a 1/2 inch. The biggest this drill bit will go is a 1/2 inch. So I don't know if we can go that deep though. We can't go that deep, so I gotta get a different step bit. Alright, so I had to switch to this little baby step bit. Its max diameter is 1/2 inch, which is what we want. It just doesn't go as deep, so it'll be perfect for this because we won't crash into the back side. So we're just going to go all the way through. So you might say, why use a step bit? That kind of seems like a cheap half way of doing things, but the step bits work really good and they keep the hole centered the whole time. There's no chance of it getting off side to side like with a regular drill bit. That's why I like using those, because I know the hole's always going to be centered. don't have to switch drill bits 72 times. Now let's see how close that existing hole was to half inch. Look at that, it's pretty close. Alright, and then we got one more drill bit we got to do over there, the 17/30 seconds, but that's a specialty bit. I'll get that out of the rib nut bin here in a minute. Okay, now we want to deburr those on both sides as best we can with a countersink bit. Okay, you want to get those burrs off of there, otherwise your rib nuts won't seat square. Yeah, I won't be able to get to those top two, so we might have to get a little air sander up in there. Slow speed usually works better with these guys. Okay, now we're just going to hit the outside. I'm going to pop it in low gear. Now I notice this weld right here is sticking up a little past our surface there, so I'm going to grind that and those little burrs down so our panel fits real flat. Same thing here, just going to grind them down a little bit. Okay, now we're ready to drill out the final size for those holes. Oh yeah, we got to trim that off a little bit. That way it sits nice and flush. Now we're going to drill those out to the final size and install some rib nuts. Brand new 17/30 seconds drill bit. Okay, now you want this guy on high speed. That was not high speed. Okay. Now we got high speed. Alright, you ready? Brace yourself. That's it. See how I'm bracing this? Keeping that part from spinning again. Otherwise it would take you for a ride. Alright, we're ready to put some rib nuts in there. Okay. We just want some regular 3/8/16 rib nuts. These guys right here. You can get these in different grip ranges. So, for example, there's a short grip range and a long grip range. So obviously, if you had some thicker metal, you'd want to use this one. Like this one would work good in the frame rail if we were to do that, but I'd rather just tap the frame in this situation. Now the thinner ones work best in thinner sheet metal. Alright guys, this is what you need for installing these big beefy 3/8 rib nuts and 5/16 rib nuts. It's a hand operated pump action hydraulic installation tool. We sell these on our website, HammerFab.com. We call this the HFD 100 hydraulic installation tool. So it's a must-have if you're a serious fabricator doing a lot of this kind of stuff. So what you do is you got to get the correct size mandrel, and so you thread that on to the 3/8 16 mandrel, and then just pump this lightly until it's snug. Then insert it in the hole, and then pump. Squeeze. On these bigger ones, you can squeeze until you can't squeeze anymore, like that, and then you hold it. You hold it squeezed like that, and then you hit this button. That releases the pressure, and then you thread it out using this little collar. Grab another one, thread it on the mandrel, about like that. You just want to make sure that you got all the threads engaged. Like, you don't want to thread it on there halfway like that, because it'll strip the threads out. Okay, then we're just going to pump this up until it's snug, and then finish pumping it on the truck. It's still hard to squeeze, but it's not nearly as hard as just doing it by hand. They do have some air operated ones, pneumatic ones. I don't have those. They have some that you can use using a drill also. I need to get one of those. But this guy has 3,750 pounds of pull force, which is pretty significant, really. You can actually use this tool to install some of our dimple dies. Not all of them, but some of them, like our rib nut recess dies, flat recess dies, our Zeus dimple dies. Thread it on there. Alright, we're ready to bolt a bracket on that one. Alright, this side is ready for a bracket. Feeling pretty confident that they're all going to line up. Now they're a little bit off. Not too bad. Let's see if I take that one out and get that one started. It's hard to nail that, guys, with the rib nuts. That one's actually really close, so we'll go ahead and get it going. This one's off a little bit. Not by much. We're going to have to carve that one out a little bit. There we go. Do some rib nuts on the other side. Okay, that one's ready for a bracket. Boom, now we got some landing pads. Now we can start bending some tubing. You guys ready to get totally tubular? We got some roll cage tubing here. This is 1 5/8 DOM tubing. That means drawn over mandrel. Okay, that's what we want in this situation. This is just steel tubing. You could do chromoly tubing if you want. It's a little bit harder to work with because it's got more spring back. But certain race car specifications, stuff like that, require chromoly tubing. C10s don't require chromoly tubing. So we're going to use some of this because it's a little bit cheaper, but still really nice to work with. So this stuff usually comes all slimy, so we're going to hose it down a little bit with some lacquer thinner on a rag. And we just want to get all the junk off of this tube before we run it through the dies. These dies are really nice and we don't want to score them up, because if you score these up, then every time you bend something, the scratch that's in here transfers to the scratch on here. We don't want that. So it doesn't have to be perfectly clean. We want to knock off the majority of the garbage on there, because it's been laying around on the floor for a while. So the tubing that I got for doing this roll cage is like 20 feet long, and my metal rack is only like 12 feet long. So it won't fit on my metal rack. Well, it would, but it'd be sticking way out and everybody would be running into it. So in the meantime, until we can break it into some smaller chunks, it's just laying on the floor. So anyways, what we're going to do is start with just a straight stick here. We're going to plug it in. And that's it. Thanks for coming. No, just kidding. No, we're going to bend this some more. We got to put a bend like right up here, right close to this. So, well, in the end the bend needs to be close, but we really need to start like down here so that we have enough leverage on the end of that to actually bend it. So we're going to have some waste. So that's another thing. When you're building a cage, make sure you get enough tubing to account for the waste that you're going to generate. So there will be a little bit of waste. Probably, depending on how good you are, anywhere from up to 1/3 of waste. I don't know, that's just a random number I picked, but it sounds about right. So we're going to bend it, and then we're going to do another bend here. So really what we want this to end up looking like, oh, that's a snug fit. We want this bar to be bent about like that, come in that direction. Actually, not much, just about like that. And then we want to bend it right about here, just past the crux of the tire, to come down and land on our pad here. That's going to look really tough and mean. So probably what we're going to do is just do the bend on the end first and work this direction. So, but what I do know is we don't need this whole stick right now, okay? So if we get lucky, we might be able to just cut it right in the middle and have enough to do both sides and have a little bit extra. So if I do this number, I think we will. Yeah, we'll have enough. I'm going to cut this tube right in half. And that way I've got less to deal with. Okay, so we cut that long tube in half, which gives us 4.5 feet of tubing here. So just if you want to see, we give ourselves about 8 inches extra up there. We got plenty out here. We still got a foot extra down here, so we got plenty. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to use this JD Square tubing bender with 1 5/8 dies, and we're just going to slide that guy just like that. We really just need to grab the very end of it like that. Now this is an air operated air over hydraulic. It's a pretty basic machine, but it's a nice one. It's going to do the job. So I'm not really paying attention to this degree wheel right now. We'll use that later. So I mean I could, but let's see. can't use that until you get the slack taken out of it. Still got some slack in it. Wiggle it until you can get it where you can't rotate the tube anymore. Okay, now that's zero. That's where we want to start at zero. You want to snug the nut on the bottom so this thing isn't bouncing around on you. And then what you do is you just bend this little wire. I know that's all it is a wire, but that's actually what works the best. Now we're going to set that to zero and lock that down under here. Okay? Now that's going to give us a pretty accurate angle on our bend so we can duplicate the next one. Now we don't need much on this one, so I'm just going to pick a number. I'm just going to say it's going to be 10 degrees. Yeah, I think that's probably enough. Okay, then you just turn this little handle here to release it. And then let's take it out and inspect it. See, it didn't bend it very much at all, but that's all we wanted for right now, okay? So now this is the end that's going to plug into the firewall. Look at that, we're already headed, oh, that was perfect, look. So I don't want it coming all the way over to here right now. I just want it coming over here because we're gonna bend it again right here and point that one. So it's gonna come like this, okay? So that bend that we just did is just about right, okay? So now just to show you, we'll hold that in there like that. Actually, it could even come down at a little bit of an angle. Now our billet hinge is going to mount right to the side of that guy like that. It's going to be perfect. We need to decide, do we want it coming parallel or ramp down? I think ramp down looks pretty tough myself. So we'll have a little bit of a double angle here. We'll have it'll be bent in and down a little bit, but that's going to make getting this next bend really tricky. Okay, so earlier I was talking about you might make some patterns, template tubing first. Well, in this situation where we're just kind of like free, being creative out in the open, nobody cares what it is. As long as we can connect point A to point B, it doesn't really matter what the bends are, as long as we like it, right? So I'm just going to get this first tube the way I like it, and then that'll basically be my pattern for the other side to make a mirror image part. So I kind of like how that, you know, we got about 3 inches of flat right there. I actually like that. So I'm just going to leave that. And now I'm just going to pick a spot right here. Rotate that up just a little bit. And then basically right on the back side of this. So I'm gonna make a mark. I'm visualizing like down here where the center of this is. Okay, so basically projecting a line right through there, and that's where I want to mark on this tubing. But then I want to make a mark exactly. So if you follow this line, a lot of times this tubing has lines on it. Okay, so if you follow that line all the way off the end, like that. Now what you can do is look at the end of the tubing. So this would be the outside of the bend, okay? But I want to see where the inside of the bend is. So if you go straight 180 degrees across from that, like that, and then basically trace that line all the way back. There should be a line on this side too, just basically like a stretch mark. That's going to get us pretty close to where we want to bend, or where the center. So now, this will be the outside of the bend, and this line that we just made. Well, I got off a little bit. pretty close. Okay, rotate it down just a little bit more. That. That's going to be the inside of our band. No, I don't like that. Needs to be down here. Alright, that bottom line is going to be our inside bend. Okay, so now we got to decide where do we want that bend to start. I'm going to say right there. Just because that's what I think it needs to be. Okay, now just remember in your head, that's the inside of the bend. That's all you got to remember. Inside of the bend. Okay, so we bent that one first. Here's the other thing. Always bend in the same direction. So you bend this one first, and then this one, and then this one, okay? At least that's how I do it. So, you gotta get it, the collar around it. We're gonna push it through to the second bend, and then boom, there's our mark. Okay, so now the inside of the bend would be with the mark. Let's see, see my arrow was pointing to the bottom line, so I want that line on the bottom to be perfectly centered with the die. Okay, you don't want it like that. You don't want it like that. You want that line right in the middle. But then we got to scoot it back, basically to right here where the bend begins, to the edge of the die. So I'm going to project that mark out further so I can see the rotation of it, because when it's down in there I can't see it. So basically right there's the center of the die. I'm going to slide it back until I can see my mark right at the edge of the die. Now we're going to pump it forward a little bit to take up some slack. Do the wiggle thing again. And then right when it gets close to being completely out of slack, then we double check our rotation and our front to back. Okay, right there. And now what I'm going to do before I move anything is I'm going to mark. I'm going to mark where this thing is right on that tubing. And that's going to be a mark that we transfer to the other side. Okay, now we're going to take a little bit more slack out. Okay, we're going to call that 0. See, look, we're pretty close. We're still at 0 on our dial, so we know that that reset in the same spot. Okay, now, the next thing we want to do is put a digital angle finder on the end on our first bend, okay? So, in theory, the bender is square with the world, okay? The die is square with the world. This section of tubing that has not been bent is square with the world, okay? But because we got a double compound angle out here, the end, this first bend, this last 6 inches of the tubing is not square with the world. It's not off by much, maybe a couple of degrees, but we need to measure that angle and duplicate so that we can duplicate it on the next piece. So I'm going to get a digital angle finder, zero it out on the bender, and then measure that part. Okay, we're getting ready to make our second bend on our piece of tubing for the passenger side of the down bars. So we got the first bend at 10 degrees, okay? So, in theory, the bender should be square with the world. The floor should be square with the world. It's probably not perfectly level, but it doesn't matter because we're going to zero it out with a digital angle finder here in a minute. But you have to basically say this is 0, the floor is 0, and this section of the tubing is 0. So, but this section, because we've already bent it and we've rotated it, that means this bend is coming up at an angle a little bit. So it's not much, it's only a couple of degrees. But what we need to do is zero out this digital angle finder on the bender, and then take it over here and measure this angle. And that way we can make a note on there, and we can duplicate that angle. Well, when we do the next one, what we do is we rotate this with the angle finder on there again until the angle finder reads exactly that same number, and that's how we know that the rotation here is exactly the same as the rotation on this one. Got it? Good. Okay, so you want to zero it where it's going the same direction as the tubing. You don't want to zero it like this, because see how much it changed? Half a degree. So that's a lot. So we're gonna set it right there. This thing's pretty sensitive. We're just gonna hit this button a couple times until it says 0. See that? Okay, now all we're gonna do is pick it up and move it right out there. Should be, it's 1.5 degrees, or depending on how you hold it. Let's see. We're gonna call it 1 degree because it's fluctuating. There we go. We're gonna call that guy 1 degree, pointing up. Okay. So this one was 1 degree up. So when we do the other one, we have to do the opposite. 1 degree down. That's all we need to know for that right now. We are ready to bend this. Let's go. We're at 0 there. Let's do it. So we don't need much, but I think we need more than 10 degrees. I think we need 15 degrees. Whoa. My handle got stuck there. Okay, we're at 13. That might be enough. Let's check it. We don't want to go too far. That's 13 degrees. We're going to pull it out this way now because it's going to be easier to get out. You could take that collar off, but I didn't want to right now. Okay, yeah, we're good. We still got a ways to go. See here? If you look straight down, we still got to get this angle to come over to there. So we got, yeah, we got a couple of degrees to go. We could probably go up to like 20 degrees. Or we could bend that one more. Let's do 15 here. Let's go ahead and bend this one to 15 degrees just to give it a little bit more angle, more style. And then if we need more, we'll bend that one some more. This is pretty easy to get this back right where you had it. Just line up your mark on the end of the bender. Should be a mark right there. See it right there on the back side? You can put your reference mark or your witness mark wherever you want. That's where I like to put it. Huh?
So you want to point to it on camera? It's a little dark in there.
Yeah, right there. Right at the edge of this piece of metal. Still got slack. We need to wiggle it until you get the slack out. You know what else we need? A mallet. We want to get this back in the exact same spot. Pretty dang close to it. Okay, and then check our rotation, make sure the rotation is the same. It was a little bit off. Alright, now see. We're at 13 degrees, that's back where we were. Now let's go to, what do we say, 15? I'm going to go a little bit more, because there'll be some spring back. Okay, so now, see, we still need to come over some more, so I'm going to bend it back there a little bit more. Till we get that just right, where we can land right on that pad. Okay, now this one was at 10, so once we get to 10, it should start bending again. Now we're going to go to, let's go to 13. Let's go to 14. Alright. Now let's check it. Now we're getting there. That's really close right there. So now we're at the point where we can chop this off. Okay, so now we're getting to the point where I can chop that and rough cut it. But because it's an angle, it's going to be kind of tricky to get in there. So what we're probably going to have to do is shove that in there all the way. Let this come down, fit this side, and basically pull it forward until it fits. So, which that's okay. But what I would rather do is, come on. Okay, so see in here, this tube should go all the way through past the firewall. It should go, I'd like for it to go into about right there. Oh yeah, right there. Okay, and then this is going to rotate down like that, so that's going to be pretty much where our angle is. So I'm going to cut it pretty much right. I'm sighting down right where that bracket is. I'm pretty much going to cut it right where that bracket is. So because I stuck it through the firewall further, I've got a little bit of leeway here. Once I chop this, I can get it down over the bracket, and then we'll scoot it forward. And it probably isn't going to fit perfect right away, but we've got a little bit of extra sticking through, so we can drag it forward and trim this end and let that end come forward so that we can nail it. So I'm going to go cut that on the saw. Be right back. Alright, we got the tube cut. Now we're going to reinstall it into the firewall. Now we can flex this a little bit right now. We won't be able to do that later. Okay, so see I rotated it where it's going to come down. If I rotate it, see? So now we totally missed our landing pad right there, but that's okay because all we have to do is bend it more right here. See, we need all of this to bend and come over this way more, so that when it's rotated down, it lands right here. So we're just going to bend this guy a little bit more. You can feel right there when it gets right back in the middle of the throat of the bend, so you know you're in the right spot. I've done some pretty nice cages on a bender like this. Okay, now we got to get the rotation correct. Get the rotator down a little bit. Okay, so last time we were at 14. Let's go ahead and, is that right? 14? So let's go ahead and go to 17. There's a little bit here. There's going to be a lot down there. Okay. Close. Well, I might have went too far that time. Yep. Went just a little bit too far. Well, I mean, we could tweak it to do that number, as long as it's okay back, as long as that looks okay. Yeah, that'd be alright. We can just fudge it a little bit right there. I mean, if you had to, you could unbend that slightly. You're not going to unbend it very much. Like, let's try that in that hole right there. Look at that. That's just about perfect. That's it right there. We just got to trim that end a little bit, let it come forward, and that's going to be it right on the money. Let me trim that. See, the more you trim this, the higher it gets. And so you can kind of tune that. As long as you give yourself a little extra up there, you can tune that until it's just right. Okay, so we did this one 17, and this one, I can't remember, 15?
Yeah, it was 15.
Okay, so now on this, I'm not gonna try and cut that on the bandsaw because it's not gonna cut that nice. I'm gonna just grind it to my mark, okay? So take it out. Grind it. Alright, now we're down past that. Now we can just wiggle this forward so it lands just in the right spot. Well, my mark's off a little bit. I gotta grind it some more. I ground too much off the bottom. Alright, so now I think what I'm going to do, just to make sure, before I tack weld that in place, I'm going to get these panels that bolt on here that attach the front sheet metal to the core support, because this thing's flexing quite a bit. I want to make sure that that's at least in the range that it needs to be before I tack that. So I'm going to go find those in storage land somewhere, and I'll be back. Thank you for watching our latest video. If you guys would like to see more of what we have to offer here at HammerFab, such as our dimple dies, our bead roller dies, our assembly hammers, and everything else fabricated related, go to HammerFab.com. Thanks for watching.